The letter came on a Tuesday. Plain white envelope, postmarked from Austin. Inside was a single photo of a scrawny longhorn calf standing alone in a vast field. No note, just my daughter's handwriting on the back. Meet Penny. She's all that's left. 40 years I spent building the Triple R Ranch from nothing into 5,000 acres of the finest cattle country in West Texas. My legacy, my blood and sweat in every acre. When I signed it all over to my only daughter 3 months ago, I never imagined it would come to this. One cow and a daughter who won't return my calls. What Sarah doesn't know is that I've been keeping a secret that could change everything between us. A secret about her mother, about our family, about why I really gave her the ranch. I've spent my life believing the land would heal what words couldn't. I was wrong. I was barely 25 when I bought the first 100 acres outside Midland. Nothing but scrubland, most folks wouldn't give a second glance, but I saw potential. My daddy had worked oil rigs his whole life, coming home with cracked hands and a broken spirit. Land is the only thing they ain't making more of, Roy, he'd tell me. I took his life insurance money when he died and bought that first parcel instead of college. Sarah's mother, Elizabeth, was the daughter of the county's wealthiest rancher. Old man Holbrook nearly had a stroke when his Vassar-educated princess brought home a dirt-pure nobody with calluses and ambition. "That Thompson boy will never amount to a hill of beans," he'd say, loud enough for me to hear at church socials. Elizabeth would squeeze my hand under the table, her quiet defiance worth more than any cattle fortune. When we married in '84, not a single Holbrook showed up except Elizabeth's younger brother, James. The two of them had always been close, thick as thieves since childhood. James slipped us a check at the reception, enough for another 100 acres and our first proper herd. "Someone in this family ought to recognize love when they see it," he said. Sarah came along 3 years later. From the moment she could walk, that girl had ranch dust in her veins. By 6, she could spot a sick calf faster than my foreman. By 12, she was helping with the spring branding, fearless around animals 3 times her size. I'd watch her from the fence, this tiny thing with her mother's golden hair and my stubborn chin, already knowing more about cattle than half the hands I employed. Elizabeth died when Sarah was 14, ovarian cancer that moved too fast for doctors to catch. The ranch saved me from drowning in grief. I'd work from sunrise until my body gave out, fall into bed, then do it again. But Sarah, I didn't see how she was drifting, how much she needed more than just watching me throw myself into work. The summer before her senior year, Sarah entered our prize bull in the state fair without telling me. Duke was worth nearly $50,000, our breeding centerpiece. I found out when my foreman mentioned the trailer being prepared. "What in God's name are you thinking?" I shouted when I confronted her. "Duke isn't some 4-H project, he's the foundation of our breeding program." "Mom would have let me," she fired back. "She believed in me." I slapped my hand on the kitchen table hard enough to crack my coffee mug. "Your mother isn't here. I am, and I say Duke stays home." 2 days later, I discovered Duke was gone anyway. Sarah had convinced 3 ranch hands to help her. I was livid, embarrassed that my own daughter had gone behind my back, that my employees had chosen her over me. I drove to Dallas in a fury. When I arrived at the fairgrounds, I found Sarah surrounded by a crowd. Duke had taken Grand Champion, and 3 different breeders were already making offers for his stud services. My 14-year-old daughter had just added nearly $100,000 to our annual income. Instead of congratulating her, I marched up, grabbed her arm in front of everyone, and hissed, "We're going home, now." The drive back was silent. I was too proud to admit she'd been right, too angry about the disobedience to see the triumph. When we got home, Sarah went straight to her room and stayed there all weekend.
After that, something changed between us. Sarah did her chores, kept her grades up, but the light dimmed in her eyes when I entered a room. She left for UT Austin the day after graduation and hardly came home after that. Meanwhile, the RRR flourished. I expanded to 5,000 acres, built a cutting-edge breeding program, weathered droughts and market crashes. I kept telling myself I was building it all for Sarah, even as she pursued her business degree and took a job with an investment firm in Austin instead of coming back to the ranch. The secret started with a letter James sent me after Elizabeth died. Her brother had kept quiet about something all those years, something that would have torn our family apart. I hid that letter in my safe, telling myself I was protecting Sarah. The truth was, I was protecting myself and the only thing I had left, this land and the daughter who was slipping away. As Sarah's 30th birthday approached, I made what I thought was a grand gesture. I signed over the entire ranch to her, $5 million worth of Texas heartland with a heritage longhorn operation known throughout the Southwest. I thought it would heal us. I thought it would bring her home. I hadn't seen Sarah in person for nearly 8 months when I called to tell her about transferring the ranch. She sounded shocked, then suspicious.
"Why now, Dad?" Her voice had that careful tone she'd developed over the years, the one she used when expecting disappointment. "It's always been yours," I said. "Time to make it official." She flew in from Austin the following weekend. The awkwardness between us hung thick as the summer heat. My housekeeper, Marietta, who'd been with us since Sarah was little, tried to smooth things over with Sarah's favorite chicken fried steak and peach cobbler. "Your daddy's been planning this for months," Marietta told her, shooting me a look that said I should have mentioned that fact myself. Sarah nodded politely, but kept checking her phone. Her Austin life, whatever that entailed, seemed more pressing than this homecoming. She'd cut her hair short, wore clothes that cost more than a month of ranch hand wages, and carried herself with a city sharpness that made me feel like a backwards old man. I'd planned a small gathering to celebrate the transfer, just the core ranch staff and a few neighbors who'd known Sarah since childhood. Old Bill Rollins from the neighboring spread, the Garcias, whose son Miguel had worked as our foreman for the past decade, Sheriff Dawson, who'd taught Sarah to fish in our stock tank when she was knee-high. "Is this necessary?" Sarah asked when I mentioned the party. "Can't we just sign the paperwork and be done?" The word stung. "These people have watched you grow up. They care about you." "They work for you," she corrected. "There's a difference." I bit my tongue. This wasn't how I'd imagined this going. "It's just one evening." The party was set for Saturday night in the ranch's main barn, which we'd cleared and decorated with string lights. Miguel's wife Teresa had arranged wildflowers in mason jars on hay bales covered with checkered cloths. A local band set up in the corner, friends of mine who played the kind of country western Sarah had danced to as a girl. "Is this necessary?" Sarah asked when I mentioned the party. "Can't we just sign the paperwork and be done?" The word stung. "These people have watched you grow up. They care about you." "They work for you," she corrected. "There's a difference." I bit my tongue. This wasn't how I'd imagined this going. "It's just one evening." The party was set for Saturday night in the ranch's main barn, which we'd cleared and decorated with string lights. Miguel's wife Teresa had arranged wildflowers in mason jars on hay bales covered with checkered cloths. A local band set up in the corner, friends of mine who played the kind of country western Sarah had danced to as a girl. Sarah spent most of the day before the party walking the property alone. I watched from the porch as she stood at the fence line staring at the cattle, as she ran her hand along the weathered wood of the stables. I couldn't read her face, couldn't tell if she was reconnecting or saying goodbye. That evening, as guests began to arrive, Sarah emerged, wearing a simple blue dress and cowboy boots, a concession to the occasion that gave me a flicker of hope. She smiled politely, shook hands, accepted congratulations with practiced grace. But I noticed she flinched when people called the Triple R her ranch now. The trouble started when Congressman Webb showed up uninvited. He'd been pushing me to sell a parcel of land for a development project, luxury ranch-style homes that would bring, in his words, progress to this backward county. I'd refused him 3 times already. "Roy, and this must be the famous Sarah," Webb boomed, champagne glass already in hand, though he'd just arrived. "Congratulations on your new venture, young lady." Sarah gave me a questioning look. "Greg Webb," he introduced himself, not waiting for me. "Your father and I have been discussing a partnership that could triple the value of this property." "We have not," I cut in, "and this is a private party, Greg." Webb chuckled, addressing Sarah directly. "Your daddy's stuck in the past, but I suspect you're a modern businesswoman who understands opportunity." Before Sarah could respond, Bill Rollins appeared at my side. "Webb, you got some nerve showing up here. Roy's told you no. The lady's gonna tell you no. Get on out before you embarrass yourself further." Webb's smile tightened. "Miss Thompson will make her own decisions, won't you, Sarah?" Something flickered in Sarah's eyes, a defiance I recognized but hadn't seen directed at me in years. "I'll certainly consider all options for my property," she said coolly. My jaw clenched. "Sarah? My property," she repeated louder. "Isn't that what we're celebrating? Your generous gift with no strings attached?" The music faltered. Conversations quieted. Webb looked between us, smirking. "Perhaps we could meet in Austin next week," he suggested to Sarah. "My office has some projections you might find interesting." "I'd like that," Sarah replied, not looking at me. The party resumed, but a chill had settled over the celebration. I tried to focus on serving food, making small talk, anything but the betrayal twisting in my gut. This ranch was Thompson land. The idea of developers carving it into suburban lots made me physically ill. As the evening wore on, Sarah became the center of a group that included Webb and several younger guests. Their laughter drifted over to where I stood with Bill and Sheriff Dawson. They were drinking whiskey now, Sarah matching them shot for shot like she had something to prove. "She's just testing you, Roy," Bill murmured. "Kids do that." "She's 30 years old," I said. "Hardly a kid." Miguel approached, concern etched on his weathered face. "Boss, you should see this." He led me to the back of the barn where a laptop was open on a hay bale. On screen was a real estate listing for the Triple R Ranch. The photos were professional, taken recently without my knowledge. The description mentioned development potential and investment opportunity. The listing date was 3 days after our phone call about the transfer. My vision blurred with anger and hurt. I hadn't even signed the papers yet, and she was already planning to sell it out from under me. Everything I'd built, everything Elizabeth and I had dreamed of for our family, gone to make way for McMansions and strip malls. I stormed back into the main barn, the roar of blood in my ears drowning out the music. Sarah was laughing at something Webb said, her cheeks flushed with whiskey and defiance. "When were you going to tell me?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the music. The band stopped playing. Sarah turned, her smile fading as she saw my face. "Tell you what? That you're selling the ranch before the deed is even in your name." The color drained from her face. "You were snooping through my computer? Miguel found your listing, 5,000 acres of prime development opportunity. Is that all this place is to you? Just dollar signs?" Guests were staring now, uncomfortable witnesses to our family drama. Sarah straightened her spine, eyes flashing.
What did you expect, Dad? That I'd move back here and play cowgirl? Abandon my entire life in Austin to preserve your little kingdom? This ranch is our heritage, your mother. Don't you dare bring Mom into this, she snapped. She wouldn't recognize what you've turned this place into anyway. A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah took a step toward me, lowering her voice, but not her intensity. Did you think this grand gesture would erase everything? That I'd just forget and fall in line? I could feel the weight of James's letter pressing on me, though it was locked in my safe up at the house. 20 years I'd kept that secret. 20 years of building this ranch bigger, better, more successful, trying to bury the truth under acres of accomplishment. You don't understand what you're throwing away, I said. Sarah laughed, a harsh sound, nothing like her mother's. No, Dad, you don't understand. You never have. That's when Miguel's eldest boy, Ricky, burst through the barn doors, panic on his face. Fire! There's a fire in the east pasture! The barn emptied in seconds. Outside, the night sky glowed orange above the eastern ridge, where our best grazing land stretched toward the horizon. The wind was picking up, pushing the flames toward the winter hay storage and the main breeding pens.
"Call the county fire department," I shouted, already moving toward the utility trucks. "Miguel, get the water trailer. Bill, help me round up any hands who aren't 3 sheets to the wind." The ranch's emergency protocols kicked in. Men and women who'd spent their lives on this land instantly sober and focused. Sarah stood frozen on the porch, the city veneer stripped away by the primal sight of fire threatening livestock. "Sarah," I barked, "either help or stay out of the way." Something in her snapped back to attention, muscle memory from growing up on this land. Without a word, she kicked off her heels, hiked up her dress, and ran for the stables. For the next hour, we fought the fire as a unit, a community defending what was ours. Sarah worked the fence lines, opening gates so cattle could move away from the flames. I spotted her through the smoke, face blackened, directing panicked animals with the authority of someone born to this life. The county fire trucks arrived, but it was our own efforts that had contained the worst of it. By midnight, the immediate danger had passed. We'd lost some fencing and about 20 acres of grazing land, but no structures or animals. A miracle, the fire chief called it. Back at the main house, the party guests who'd stayed to help gathered on the porch. Marietta was passing out coffee and cold water. Sarah stood apart, staring at the smoldering horizon, something unreadable in her posture. Congressman Webb approached her, his expensive suit ruined but his opportunism intact. "Quite a night," he said, loud enough for me to hear. "Really drives home the liability of all this open land. Insurance premiums alone will eat into your profits." I watched Sarah's shoulders stiffen. Webb pressed on. "My development plan includes a private fire station. Response time would be under 5 minutes, not the 40 it took the county boys to get here." That was it. After the emotional roller coaster of the day, after watching fire threaten everything I'd built, I couldn't take any more. I marched over to them. "Get off my property," I growled at Webb. He smirked. "Actually, I believe it's your daughter's property now, or it will be once you sign those papers, and she's interested in my proposal." "Dad," Sarah started. "No." My voice carried across the porch, silencing side conversations. "This ends now." I turned to face everyone, the neighbors, the ranch hands, my daughter. 20 years of secrets boiled up inside me, burning hotter than the brush fire we'd just fought. "I built this ranch from nothing," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Turned scrubland into one of the finest cattle operations in West Texas. I did it for my family, for my legacy. And I looked directly at Sarah. I thought giving it to my daughter would heal the rift between us. I was wrong." Sarah's expression hardened. "If you're having second thoughts about the transfer, "This isn't about the transfer," I cut her off. "It's about why I built this place, why I kept expanding, why I couldn't stop, even after your mother died." I pulled an envelope from my back pocket, not the deed to the ranch, but James's letter. I'd grabbed it from the safe before heading down to the barn party, some part of me knowing this confrontation was inevitable. "Your Uncle James wrote me this letter after your mother passed," I said, unfolding the paper with trembling hands. "I've kept it hidden for 20 years. The porch fell silent, except for the distant crackle of embers and the chorus of night insects. Sarah's eyes widened, fixated on the yellowed paper in my hands. "Elizabeth was pregnant when we married," I began, voice cracking. "Not with you. You came later. With James's child." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Sarah's face drained of color.
Her father threatened to disown her. James was engaged to a senator's daughter, a political alliance too important to break. They begged me, the nobody ranch hand who was hopelessly in love with her, to marry her quickly, claim the child as mine. My eyes burned with unshed tears. I agreed. I loved her that much. But she lost that baby 3 months later. We grieved together, and when you came along, you were truly ours. But by then, I was obsessed with proving myself worthy, building something so grand that the Holbrooks would have to respect me, even if they knew the truth. I looked around at the faces of people who'd known me for decades, seeing shock, pity, even judgment. After Elizabeth died, James sent me this letter, confessing that he'd always loved her, that giving her up was his greatest regret. And he told me something else. The Holbrook Ranch was built on stolen land, taken from Mexican families during the border disputes of the 1800s. The fortune that made them royalty in this county was tainted from the start. I turned back to Sarah, whose face had gone from shocked to stony. I kept expanding the R, thinking if I made it big enough, successful enough, it would wash away the lies. That you'd come back and see what I'd built for you and understand how much I loved your mother, how much I love you. The silence that followed seemed eternal. Then Sarah spoke, her voice tight with fury. 20 years, she said. 20 years you let me believe I wasn't good enough for this place, that I'd never measure up to your standards, that I'd failed you by leaving. She stepped forward, snatching the letter from my hand. All this time, it was you who felt inadequate, you who was living a lie. And instead of talking to me, your daughter, you just kept building bigger fences and buying more land. Webb cleared his throat awkwardly.
"Perhaps I should shut up," Sarah and I said in unison, our eyes locked on each other. She crumpled the letter in her fist. "You think this changes anything? That it justifies how you pushed me away? How you dismissed my ideas, my abilities? How you made me feel like I was nothing compared to this precious land?" The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so busy proving myself that I'd failed to see I was losing the one person who mattered. "I'm selling the ranch," Sarah announced, looking around at the shocked faces. "Not because I don't care about this land, but because my father made it a monument to his insecurities instead of a home for his family." With that, she turned and walked into the house, slamming the door behind her. The remaining guests began to disperse, murmuring uncomfortably. Bill squeezed my shoulder as he passed, but said nothing. I stood alone on the porch, staring at the closed door, the smell of smoke still heavy in the air. Sarah was gone before dawn. She left the crumpled letter on the kitchen table, anchored by her house key. No note, no goodbye. Marietta found me sitting there when she came in to start breakfast, staring at that small heap of ruined promises. "She'll be back," Marietta said with a certainty I couldn't share. "That girl is more like you than either of you want to admit." The next few days passed in a blur. News of my public confession spread through the county like wildfire.
Some folks called to offer awkward support. Others suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere when they saw me in town. The Holbrook name still carried weight in these parts, even decades later, and I just dragged it through the mud. On Wednesday, Miguel asked to speak with me privately. I braced myself, expecting his resignation. Instead, he placed a small stack of papers on my desk. "The boys and I have been talking," he said, indicating the documents.
"We'd like to buy in to the RRR, form a cooperative, keep it running the way it should be." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "We don't have millions," he continued, "but between 15 families who've worked this land, some for 3 generations, we can make a fair offer for a share. Keep the developers out." The proposal outlined a structure where I'd retain majority ownership, but the workers would gradually increase their stake through sweat equity and profit sharing. It was innovative, practical, and completely unexpected. "Why would you do this?" I asked, after what I revealed. Miguel shrugged. "Your past is your business. How you've treated us for 30 years, that's what matters to me. You've been fair, paid well, helped when our families needed it. The RRR is more than just your name, Mr. Thompson." For the first time since the party, I felt a flicker of hope. "I'll need to talk to Sarah. The transfer isn't finalized, but legally—" "Already called her," Miguel interrupted with a slight smile. "She said to tell you she'll be here Saturday to discuss it." Sarah arrived with an entourage, 2 environmental lawyers, a sustainability consultant, and surprisingly, her uncle James. At 73, James Holbrook looked frailer than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp as he shook my hand. "Long overdue," he said simply. We gathered in the dining room, where Marietta had laid out coffee and her famous pecan bars, Sarah's favorite since childhood. The formality of the meeting was immediately undercut by the familiar smell of home baking and the way Sarah unconsciously reached for a pecan bar before anyone had even sat down. "Let me be clear," Sarah began once everyone was settled. "I'm still selling the ranch." My heart sank, despite Miguel's warning look telling me to hear her out. "But not to Webb's Development Group," she continued. "They were never a serious option. I only entertained them to get your attention." "You certainly did that," I muttered. Sarah ignored me. "I've spent the last 3 days in Austin pulling together a different plan." She nodded to one of the lawyers, who slid a bound presentation across the table. "The RRR is going to become a land conservation trust with a working heritage ranch component." For the next hour, Sarah outlined a vision that left me speechless. The bulk of the acreage would be placed in a permanent conservation easement, protecting it from future development. The cattle operation would continue, but with a focus on sustainable grazing practices and heritage longhorn preservation. A portion would be opened for educational programs, teaching sustainable ranching to a new generation. And, crucially, Miguel and the other ranch families would form the operational backbone, with ownership stakes that would grow over time. "The Thompson-Holbrook Land Trust," Sarah concluded, "honoring both sides of our family history, including the uncomfortable parts." James spoke up then, his voice quavering slightly. "I've endowed a scholarship fund as part of this arrangement for Hispanic students studying sustainable agriculture and land management, a small step toward addressing historical wrongs." I looked from James to Sarah, then to Miguel. "You've been planning this for months." Sarah nodded. "Since before your offer to transfer ownership. I was going to propose buying the ranch from you. Then you surprised me with your grand gesture, and She hesitated. "I reacted poorly." "We both did," I admitted. "There's something else you should know," Sarah said, her voice softening. "Uncle James told me the truth years ago, about their relationship, about the first pregnancy." I stared at her. "What?" James looked down at his hands. "After Elizabeth's funeral, Sarah was asking questions about her mother's youth. I was emotional. I told her more than I should have." "You knew?" I asked Sarah. "All this time? You knew?" She nodded. I thought you kept it secret because you were ashamed. Ashamed of Mom, ashamed of me, because I reminded you of her family. God, no, I whispered. I was trying to protect you, and yes, to protect myself, too, my pride. That's our problem, Dad, Sarah said. We're too alike, too stubborn to just talk to each other. The meeting continued for hours, working through the legal and financial details. By sunset, we had the framework of an agreement. The lawyers departed, promising final documents within the week. James retired to the guest room, leaving Sarah and me alone on the porch with glasses of bourbon. Why a single cow? I finally asked. In that photo you sent. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. Penny was born the night Mom died, remember? The calf we thought wouldn't make it? I did remember, a scrawny thing, rejected by her mother. Sarah had bottle-fed her, slept in the barn for weeks to keep her alive. You kept her all this time? She's the matriarch of my small herd now, Sarah said. I've been running 30 head on leased land outside Austin for the past 5 years, developing my own breeding program. That's what I was trying to tell you before all this blew up. I never left ranching. I just needed to do it my own way, without your shadow. The revelation stunned me. You could have told me. Would you have listened? Really listened? Her question hung in the air between us. 2 months later, we signed the final papers establishing the Thompson-Holbrook Land Trust. Sarah kept her apartment in Austin, but started spending 3 days a week at the ranch. We argued constantly about management approaches, my traditional methods versus her progressive ideas. But there was a new respect underlying the debates.
The unexpected twist came from Webb, of all people. When news of our conservation plan went public, he launched a smear campaign claiming we were blocking county progress and jobs. The backlash was immediate, but not in the way he expected. Local families, many with generations tied to ranching, rallied behind us. Webb lost his re-election bid the following November. Sarah's breeding program, integrated with our existing stock, began producing cattle with remarkable drought resistance and leaner meat profiles, exactly what the changing market demanded. The educational programs brought school groups and aspiring ranchers to the RRR, filling the place with young energy I hadn't realized was missing. One evening, almost a year after the confrontation, Sarah found me at Elizabeth's grave on the small hill overlooking the main pasture. The sunset painted the land in golds and purples, cattle dark shapes against the fading light. She would have loved what we're doing here, Sarah said, placing wildflowers beside the simple stone. She would have done it 30 years ago if I'd had the sense to listen, I admitted. Sarah linked her arm through mine. We're both too stubborn to learn things the easy way. I looked out at the land that had consumed me for most of my life, the land I'd nearly lost along with my daughter. It was changed now, evolving into something Elizabeth would indeed have loved. Something Sarah and I were building together, flaws and history acknowledged, a new legacy taking root. "One cow," I said, shaking my head. "You certainly know how to make a point." Sarah laughed. "I am your daughter, after all." In that moment, with the RRR spreading before us and my daughter beside me, I finally understood what Elizabeth had tried to tell me all those years ago. Legacy isn't measured in acres or cattle counts. It's in the truths we're brave enough to face, and the love that survives them. I still walk the fence lines at dawn sometimes, an old habit I can't quite break. The morning light hits differently now, softer somehow, as if the land itself has exhaled after holding its breath for decades. The Thompson-Holbrook Trust has been running for 3 years. Our sustainable practices have won state recognition, and ranchers from as far as Montana have come to see what we're doing. Sarah lives in the East cabin full-time now. She's expecting her first child in November, a daughter. She plans to name her Elizabeth. I catch myself watching Sarah direct the seasonal hands, her voice carrying across the pasture with the same authority her mother once commanded.
The secret that nearly destroyed us has become simply another thread in our family tapestry, acknowledged but no longer defining. Yesterday, I found Penny, that scrawny calf now a magnificent matriarch, standing by the eastern fence, the rising sun turning her hide to burnished gold. I thought about how a single photo of one cow had shattered my illusions and ultimately saved everything that matters. The land remains, but it's no longer a monument to my insecurities. It's a living promise to future generations, my grandchild included, that some things are worth preserving, worth fighting for. Not out of pride or shame, but out of love and respect for what came before and what's yet to come. If you're fighting your own battles with family, with legacy, with secrets too long kept, take it from an old rancher who nearly lost everything trying to protect the wrong things. The truth may hurt, but silence destroys. What matters most is rarely what we build, but who we build it with. If you found something worthwhile in my story, hit that subscribe button to hear more tales from the ranch. And remember, sometimes it takes just one cow to change everything.